seen these things? All right. We provide legal observers and legal advice for people who do things like what you guys are doing. All right. We usually call these things, unless people have trouble hearing me. All right. We usually call these things know your rights training. All right. But for reasons I'm going to explain, this isn't really what I like to call them. I like to call these how to disarm a police officer. Okay? Now, all that. The first thing you need to understand, all right, is that you're not really dealing with a legal problem. Okay? You're dealing with a political problem. All right? And keep your eye on the ball. They are using the law as a weapon. But it is really a political issue, and you guys are pushing a political issue, and you shouldn't let them turn it into a legal issue. Example, in Los Angeles, the mayor and the city council invited the occupation, gave them a place to stay, all right, welcomed them. In Philadelphia, the mayor came out to show his support. Philadelphia and Los Angeles have all the same kinds of laws we have about sleeping in public, about staying on the sidewalk, all right, all the other things that they're doing to you to restrict your ability. All right, what's the difference between Chicago and Los Angeles? The politicians in charge of Los Angeles welcome their occupation. The politician in charge of Chicago wants you gone, all right? And one of the, understand where you're seeing the most pressure on the occupations, New York and Chicago, what do they have in common? Number one, they have a big financial industry, all right? Chicago does, New York does. Number two, they got a guy in the mayor's office who's made a buttload of money in the financial industry, all right? Yeah, I mean, Rahm Emanuel, he takes a year off politics, goes and works for an investment banker, makes $14 million. Where's he coming from? He's on their side, all right?
He's the Illuminati, but
so,
you don't know that.
First and foremost, don't let the police get you obsessed about the nitpicky, petty enforcement they're doing. Yeah. This is not primarily a legal dispute. This is a political dispute. All right? I'm going to do a little bit more on strategy just to persuade you. All right? And then we're going to get to tactics. Strategy. Okay? Now I'm going to explain to you what the police are being instructed to do by the mayor, all right, is not really law enforcement, all right? The bad news is that it is low-intensity warfare. Now, I know that's a tough sell. It is counterinsurgency, all right? And just to illustrate the point, Parade, could you get over here? Just so I'm going to start using shit, all right? This here, all right, is a study that was prepared by the Department of Defense back in the 90s. All right? It was done by the Rand Institute, which is like the brains of the Defense Department. All right? The important thing is, you look at this, it is called the advent of net war. Net war. Remember that word. All right? It doesn't mean about the internet. It means about social networks. Okay? Their focus are groups like Al-Qaeda, or my tradition, the Irish Republican Army, all right? And it's really discussing social organizations and networks and how they pose a threat to states, all right? The interesting thing about this is, as far as they're concerned, an NGO, a non-governmental organization, is an NGO. So yes, they talk about the IRA and Al-Qaeda, but they also talk about the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, a Nobel Peace Prize organization, all right, in the Department of Defense's study on counterinsurgency. All right? This was in the late 90s. Here is the follow-up, also by Rand. All right? And it's called Networks and Net Wars. All right? Here is where they bring it home. They're not just talking about international NGOs. There's a chapter in here on the battle in Seattle. Okay? They are analyzing domestic networks and organizations the same way they analyze Al-Qaeda. All right? It's low-intensity warfare. So you don't think I'm paranoid. All right. This, you've seen the riot police that they use in this town. All right? Well, when the Iraq War broke out, we had 800 people arrested. All right? Up just off Michigan Avenue. All right? Which they shouldn't have done. All right? But again, this is not law enforcement. It's counterinsurgency. There's a lawsuit over that. It's still pending. As part of that lawsuit, we got the training manual for the crowd control police, which a friend of mine dubbed the ninjas, because that's what they're dressed like, ninjas. Right? And you look at this is what they use to train the ninjas. All right, the first thing they have in here is they draw some historical analogies. All right, and for instance, the Battle of Thermopylae. The metaphor is they had 300 people, just like there are fewer police than there are people here. 300 people held off a horde of Persians. That's the metaphor they're using. They are the Spartans, we're the Persian horde. Okay? All right? All right? And then the Battle of Ishua, same thing. Then they bring it home. Haymarket. All right? Haymarket. And then, you know, they talk about the psychology of masses and a mob. They talk about the battle over Seattle. And then you find the magic word. Net war. Core players. All right? So I ran you through those so you can understand that what's going on here is not law enforcement. It's really counterinsurgency and low-intensity warfare, and it's political. And don't get too distracted with legal. All right? The bad news is it's not law enforcement. It's low-intensity war. The good news, and there is good news, they don't know how to win. And they know it. Okay? And they acknowledge it. The experts at RAND, they all acknowledge it. They do not know how to defeat an indigenous insurgency. No state has ever defeated an indigenous insurgency. So as long as you understand what you're doing, which is a political thing, and as long as you use your head, all right, you can win. And you know, I will say again, my background is first, foremost, and always Irish. All right, and I look at the way you guys are doing this, okay, and you know, you get a lot of grief for your non-confrontation approach. Well, you know, Irish, until recently, we were still shooting people and blowing people up, okay, but I'm Irish, and I'll tell you, you guys have done everything right so far. You make the decisions. You decide when and how you're going to have a confrontation. Don't let them decide it for you. You pick your battles. You decide how to fight them. You stay in control of the situation. Okay, so that's strategy. Bad news is it's not law enforcement. It's war. Good news is they don't know how to win. All right? Now we'll get to tactics. This is the Matrix. Okay? That's what they call it. All right?
The Illuminati.
This is what they use to train police officers on the use of force. Okay? So, this is how they train them to use force on you. All right? Now, this thing's really complicated, but there's a simple way to view it. First of all, I mean, there's two axes. All right? On the horizontal axis, this is the police officer's behavior. All right? And then on the vertical axis, all right, this is the subject's behavior. Now they're trying to be nice, saying subject and not criminal or suspect, but they're still not getting it right. We're not subjects, we're citizens. Okay? And we fought a revolution against somebody who called us subjects. The important thing to understand about this is that the police officer's behavior is a function of your behavior. They are trained, okay, to use force according to the way you're behaving. All right? That gives you an opportunity. All right? If they follow your training, you can determine how the police officer responds based on what you do. All right? But it's a little tricky because, you know, most of us think that force begins with a battery, a touching. But force actually begins long before person touches person. For instance, okay, a wind-up, that's an assault. It's a crime. I don't actually have to touch somebody to commit a crime. All right? You place somebody in a reasonable apprehension of imminent bodily harm, that's a crime. A touching, all right, and it can be as simple. Any harmful or offensive touching is a battery. The other day, somebody flicked a cigarette at a police officer. That was a battery. And not just a battery to a police officer. I'm sure the person who didn't realize that he was committing a felony. All right, but he was. All right? They didn't catch whoever it was, or she. Whoever did it probably just thought it was a neat little stunt. Didn't realize they were committing battery to a police officer. The police are taught to think of the use of force in levels. All right, and that thing gets complicated, but there's a simple way to remember it. Physical presence, verbal direction, empty hand control, intermediate weapon systems, lethal force. Okay, I'll walk you through those real quick. Physical presence. A show of force is a use of force. All right? For instance, some of you participated in the marches going on today, and when you got to near the Art Institute, they had the horses and the paddy wagons and all these cops. All right? And they are making a show of force. The fact that there's a lot of police there is enough to make people behave. All right? And how does this work on a one-to-one level or on a small group level? You've probably seen it. There's something going on. The cops arrive. All right? They wear uniforms so that their presence is obvious and known. All right? You know, say somebody having a nasty argument. The cop shows up. All right? What the police officer is looking for is